This subject is actually something that I love. It's my passion. It has to do with human behavior. My whole life has been focused on behavior. In fact, I went to Alzheimer's and neurology because of understanding human behavior. More on the empowerment side. There's, we talk about what's good for you, what's, exercise, nutrition, stress management, and all of those things. And if I have time, I'll also speak to stress management, which is important at this time. But how do we make it happen in our lives? That's more important to me. And there's a lot of guilt and blame associated with a lot of this, and there shouldn't be such a thing. I mean, human behavior is something that we should be able to manifest and act upon. So, but first we have to, okay, 1 second while the images go up there. There we go. Okay, that's me. So, failures. They say never start a talk with such a negative term, but I think it's the opposite. You start low and then there's only one place to go, which is high, right? So start with failures. We have failed miserably as far as change is concerned. We keep talking about, we've been invited to every conference you can imagine. We've heard about every kind of diet, lifestyle that you can imagine. But as far as change, really truly empowering people, we have failed miserably. The best studies show that we are 15% successful for a short period of time. The rest of the time, we fail in helping people empower themselves. And that's in the lieu of the fact that there's so much noise now, given that now we have internet and social media and Instagram and TikTok and all these things that I know that I'm getting old when TikTok becomes one of those things. It's overwhelming people with data, and majority of the data is false. And majority of the data is just clickbait to just get your attention, but doesn't touch reality. And here's the thing about human behavior. If there's multitude of behaviors to choose from, you'll settle to the baseline that you're comfortable with. So everybody's settling down. And the baseline that we're comfortable with is driven by a background of marketing that is powerful. And I'm not making any political statements or anything, but that Google engine knows you better than your partner now. I'm sorry. You didn't know that I wanted a tennis racket, and Google did. Yeah. So Google knows me better than you. So they know it because every time I go there, the tennis racket comes up. I'm like, okay, I got it. I'll buy it. And we have failed miserably. Let's just take one variable. Weight. Obesity. As measured by BMI. Although we don't care about that number, but let's take that as a point that as a culture, as a society, we say that we want to change that, right? Every kind of diet, we're doing a podcast, we're preparing for ketogenic diet, and we went over the list of diets. Just the list would take us half an hour to go through. It's crazy, and we keep failing one after the other. Obesity rate in the United States, 1990, was 11.6%. After all the talk, all the commercials, all the late night shows, all the talking heads, including us and everybody else, we did very well. We increased it to 31.3%. The map looked like the one in the blue in 1990. Only 5 states were basically marginally obese. Now, majority of states are on the obese realm. And not that weight matters. This is not actually speaking to that. It's speaking to objectives that are failing. That's it. And why? This is the best picture I could find. Because change is difficult. Aisha looked at it and said, how is this speaking? So I just like the picture. Sometimes I just like the picture. So change is difficult. Actually, I'm scared of oceans. That's why I thought about difficult. So. And all change feels like a threat. What you know is familiar, even if it's bad. We know all the data about people who go to I hope I don't, create an emotional state, but you're with a person that's abusive and you keep going back to the abusive person. You keep going back to the broken relationships. You go back to the broken conversations. I remember myself, you kind of trigger certain behaviors in the hope of some change happening. Why? Because we're familiar with what we're familiar with. Change is 360 degrees of unknown. It's difficult. Change is complex. What am I changing? With all the data, with all the information, with all the types, with all the variations of expressions of behavior, from late night TV shows to the talking heads and the person that just says the right thing. I love this one. You know, science has made mistakes. You know your own body very well, and go by that. By the way, follow me. Basically, that means we'll get rid of data that comes from a consensus form, and then you're left with nothing except him. That's a method. That's a grifting method that's used often. So complexity is another thing that pushes you away from change. We go down the path of least resistance, not the easiest path, because when you have to change paths, it is actually a higher energy state. As it is, 25% of your body's energy is being spent with regular thinking. You know, looking at some TV show. I'm not even talking about news. I'm not even talking about something controversial. Just regular thinking and conversation is 25% of energy. You think by going a path of that's more resistant, more, different, a variation of a thing you know, or maybe you don't even know. You think that's going to be easy? It's incredibly difficult. And you create these pathways of behavior, thought, and motion. They are started very early. You start these pathways very early, and you then keep going because there's no way to get out, because these walls of snow have been built in. It took you years to dig through to create those paths. You think you're going to change that now? It takes quite a bit of work to create that. And then finally, there's a perpetual battle between your limbic brain and your frontal lobe, your prefrontal cortex, the thinking brain. We are proud that our brain is different from other animals because of our frontal lobe. As a neurologist, we always talk about this. We see this in many conferences. But you know what's more powerful than your frontal lobe? That little amygdala, that little center of emotion, that's the size of the tip of your thumb. It's more powerful. There's a great book by Daniel Goldberg, Emotional Intelligence, that speaks to that. Others have spoken about it as well, that as intelligent as you think, emotions can take over if you're not prepared ahead of time. We know some of the greatest people we know that have done terrible things because their emotion just took over for that moment. And that happens quite often. Emotions take over. And the two brains, the thinking brain and the feeling brain, are perpetually in a battle. They're symbols of emotion, symbols of happiness, symbols of history, fun, that are created around the emotional brain, and then the other brain, which is more forward-looking. Why would I look forward? I don't even recognize it. I don't know where it is. I don't know where I want to go. But that's the thinking brain. There's a reason you have a brain, is for that frontal lobe. It's not just recall. Elephants do a greater job of recalling. In fact, there are animals that have way bigger brains than us, way bigger brains. The one part of the brain that is not bigger than us is the frontal lobe. So it's a constant battle. So we need to take control and understand this biology. There are several, I don't want to get too wonky and technical, but I think it's important to talk about at least these 6 things. And this gives, I have never heard this talk, so I want to make sure that I do it in a way where it's received. So it's not I'm talking to myself, which is a lot of academic talks. So come back to me, ask me questions. I really think this is the most important 6 elements that we can kind of help people get a handle of. We hear this all the time, especially in the age of the limbic system. Everybody's heard about dopamine, and everybody's talking about dopamine because you can open up an internet. But what is it, and how do we control it? Serotonin, and that's just 2 transmitters. They don't even talk about acetylcholine and everything else, but these are important ones. The prefrontal cortex, the autonomic system, the limbic-hypothalamic pituitary axis. These are important. In fact, there's nothing that affects your body more than the limbic-hypothalamic pituitary axis. How many people know about that axis? Good. Then that's going to be useful. Okay. So let's talk about the limbic-hypothalamic pituitary axis. It's an incredibly powerful system. I dare say that every hormone, every chemical, including your immune system, is affected by this. And here's the fun part. It is affected by your language, the language inside you, how you interpret things. So what happens, something happens to you, be it behavior, emotion, or thought. It provokes something in your limbic system. Your brain interprets it, that part of the brain, the emotional brain, says it's bad, it's stressful, it's negative. Here's the clue. You can affect that part. And then that sends a different set of neurotransmitters to the hypothalamus, which is the control center. Hypothalamus sends a message to the pituitary gland. The size of the tip of your pinky. It is so powerful. Guess what? Every hormone you can think of is controlled from there. From growth hormone to sex hormones to insulin to thyroid to even immune system, bone growth, everything is controlled from there. So what happens and how something is interpreted in the hypothalamus, in the limbic system affects your entire system. So the language that you occupy in your limbic system can, for a long time, affect your endocrine system, immune system, growth, everything. That's why people who have stress in childhood are actually shorter. That's not my excuse, don't worry, it's genetics. They have more thyroid disorders. Not all thyroid disorders are related to that, so I don't want to make sure that we get separation. But it could. Sex disorders, they can have hair loss, they can have all these things. Every system, immune deficiency, cancer rates, dementia, everything is affected. And it starts with your limbic system and how the brain interprets tension and stress. That's one area that we want to talk about. And this is the pituitary. Look at how many organs that it affects. Every system in your body, including the part that's not shown here, is oxytocin, which is the hormone that affects emotions indirectly as one of the variables. The second system is the autonomic system. This system has been with us from the very beginning. It's the primordial system. It's a system that actually is mostly the one on the left, the sympathetic. That's the more powerful. That's the fight or flight. That's the one that's worried about the tiger, bear, or rabid dog. So we have to, or infection, or starvation. It's a survival. It's called fight or flight. And it's there for emergencies. And in emergency situation, it does well. And it's good that it responds. What happens? When the sympathetic system kicks in, triggers in, your peripheral vasculature collapses. Your heart rate gets faster. You get sweaty. Your pupils shrink so you can see better. Your immune system is quiescent, goes quiet. Your reproductive system goes quiet. Your lungs actually change as far as how they take in oxygen and exchange carbon dioxide. Your kidneys actually start functioning less. Your bones actually start metabolizing differently because they worry about survival. Every system is affected. Well, this is fine for a short period. But what if this goes on for hours, days, months, years? Imagine what that does. You remember, immune system is lowered. That's why people get shingles under stress. That's why people have a higher rate of cancers under stress. So this is another system. And the parasympathetic system, which is called the rest and restore, which is the opposite. It's less powerful. It wants to be powerful, but just the poor guy can't. But you have to give it a chance. If you are able to control the sympathetic system, then the parasympathetic system is powerful. It's reproduction, restoration, growth hormone, and all of those things. Every system is affected. The next thing is dopamine. Dopamine has two functions generally, and this is something that people don't usually talk about and kind of gives you a clue. Movement and motivation. Movement and motivation. If you see Parkinson's patient, if there's a line, they get stuck at the line. They can't move. And when they start moving, they do this little, they call march petit en pas, small little steps. Motivation goes down. Motivation to move, but also other kinds of motivation. And when you give them Cinemet, the opposite happens. Sometimes they get into addictive gambling behaviors and things of that nature. So your motivational centers, and when I was doing research in Parkinson's and Loma Linda, and NIH, I used to see this all the time, that variance, that jump from one side to the other side. And dopamine is motivation. Dopamine, it gets you ready to do something. It's not the emotion, but it's the preparation for emotion. It's that step that is needed to get you going. That's important. And other things like sleep, learning, attention, everything else, especially movement. Serotonin is for digestion, nausea, wound healing, and all of that other stuff. But also, most importantly, the baseline state of mood, sleep, happiness, and joy. That is what establishes that. And usually this is affected very early on, or it takes a time for that natural course that changes, either genetically, but more often environmentally, where the course of the serotonin metabolism mechanism or structure changes. What does that mean? That means over time, people's moods change, not right away. So there are things that happen to you that change the ship in a given direction. And that's a big clue. It is a ship, and you can change the direction, but it takes time. It's small little nudges to move that tanker, that 1,000 ton tanker in a given direction. But yet we try to do it immediately with medicines. I'm not against medicine. People need it. It helps for a short period. But in order to truly change the direction of that ship, you really need to do a systematic way of small nudges over time, sometimes with the help of medication. And then the lovely prefrontal cortex. That's the thinking brain. That's the executive function that plans and makes decisions, even short-term memory towards decisions, expression of personality. All that we are is prefrontal cortex. It's not movement. We're not the fastest animal. We can't even jump the furthest. We're not even the strongest, but we are the best planners. That's the frontal cortex. It's not as strong, as powerful as far as how quickly it responds to situations as the limbic system, the amygdala, but it's important to understand this. And this is where everything starts. This is where everything starts, planning ahead. If you read Dr. Goldberg's book, it talks about how do you take away the control from the limbic system by knowing your own triggers, by knowing your own weaknesses, by knowing your own things that actually get you in one direction or another, and planning ahead of it, one step ahead of it. That's important. So change requires awareness of all of these systems. Sorry, this talk is a little wordy, but I think it's important that we talk about this. Being aware of the power of your limbic system and its triggers. Know that the best of us can be taken over by the emotion of the moment. Know that. Most of us in our hubris think that I have control of everything. I have 2 teenagers. I'm a neurologist, behavioral neurologist with psychology background. I don't have control with teenagers, I can tell you that. At a whim, I still don't do something crazy, but you lose it. And you have to know what the triggers are, what the situations are, what the environments are. It's important. How your emotions and how you label them affect your entire endocrine and immune system. That limbic system affecting the hypothalamus, part of it is labeling things. The language that occupies the spaces of your mind matter. Many studies have shown that same huge 2 groups given a task to do. One group was given negative language, one group was given positive language. And it was large enough to be statistically really meaningful, not just one of those ad hoc studies. And guess which one did significantly better? The one that was given positive language. It was a difficult task. The ones that were given the negative language were told to say to themselves, it's tough, it's gonna push me. I might actually fail. I don't know if I can do this. I don't think I like this, all of this language, even though it was artificially given to them. This other group was told, It's challenging, that heartbeat beating fast, that's me actually meeting the challenge. It's going to be tough, but it's okay. Even if I fail, I'm going to learn from some, all the positive language. This group, even in one episode, one trial, that's significantly better. Imagine if that language occupies your brain all the time, or most of the time. It's not going to be all the time, I assure you. So the autonomic system and its fight or flight versus rest and restore system are important, and know that. The autonomic system is how your body immediately responds. When you feel your heart beating fast as a result of something, you don't have to give it a label like this is anxiety, this is angst, this is panic attack, but become aware of it. When people do breathing exercises, when they do meditative states of becoming aware, it's about that. It's not crossing your legs, and I'm not against that, so I'm not putting anybody down, doing the mantra. It's about becoming aware of your biofeedback mechanisms. You have an incredible biofeedback mechanism, the breathing. Right now, take 10 seconds, take a deep breath. Just 2 of them. How silly. 2 breaths, how powerful. That's your biofeedback mechanism. That's something that your body is familiar with from the moment you're born. Use it to calm your system down. And it's not just calming. It actually gives information back to your body, to your brain. When there is a reverse feedback mechanism, when somebody has public speaking problems, scared of public speaking, you give them beta blockers. Why? To slow their heart down. Why would that? Because your heart beating fast tells your brain that I'm nervous. By slowing the heart down indirectly, you actually tell them they're not nervous. We had a situation about 15 years ago where Aisha was giving a public talk in front of 5,000 people for an amazing paper. She was a little nervous. I gave her a beta blocker. She was pregnant. She goes up 5 steps. She got lightheaded, broke her ankle. Well, injured. But she gave an amazing talk. I'm joking. But the point of that story, whatever it was that that biofeedback mechanism is powerful. Use it. Another thing we do is, this is called the Allen box, where you can feel your radial artery. You take some time at home to figure it out. In a party where I get bored pretty often, she knows I'm the best 30-minute extroverted person. The rest I'm introverted. So I sit and I put my hand on my pulse and I'm listening. And you feel your pulse. Biofeedback, you need a device around your head to tell you, there it is. So those 2 biofeedback mechanisms are telling you about your autonomic system. It's more than that. I don't want to be little, simplistic, but that works. Dopamine creates anticipation and reward systems. So don't worry about the word dopamine. Control the anticipation and reward systems in your house and your life. We don't. When have you even thought about controlling or using that sentence? I'm going to control my anticipation and reward system in my life. How many people have used that sentence before? It's an extremely important sentence. Let's use that. We must, take control of the anticipation and reward systems in our life. First, we have to identify them, where they are, and we'll get to that. Serotonin is the long-term mood creator. You want to control your mood long-term? Know that that's going to be done. That's the ship. That's the oil tanker. That's the 100-ton, 1,000-ton oil tank. You can't change its direction, but it's going to take small increments. And that's the only way you can do it long-term. So let's acknowledge that. And then your frontal lobe, your thinking brain, is incredibly powerful in controlling all of this. But only by planning. Only by planning. That's it. You don't have to worry about. So all these terms, I try to demystify them because you're going to see them all the time. Dopamine, serotonin, frontal lobe, this, that. No, these are the mechanism behind them. So start with a shifted mindset, use SMART goals, and create a life around change and own it. So those of you who know what SMART goals are, how many here know SMART goals? A lot of people know SMART goals. Yeah. Those are goals that are specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. I want to be healthier is the most useless statement there is. What does that mean? Or my patients come and say, Dr. Sherzai, I'm eating healthy. I say to them, I don't even know if I eat healthy. And I've done this for 20 years. What is it as specific things I mean, are you eating 2 servings of spinach a day? That's specific. 2 servings, that's measurable, achievable. I can eat 2 servings. Is it relevant? It's relevant to my higher goal of getting healthier, for that goal. Is it time bound? If I haven't been doing it, I'm going to do it for 1 month until it becomes part of my habit. That's a smart goal. If I want to exercise, I'm going to run the marathon. No, you're not. I can assure you, you're not. I haven't yet. But I can walk, even if they can do 20 minutes a day. No, the goal is not exercise. The goal is habit and specific, measurable, achievable habit. It's 10 minutes of brisk walk. That's specific, 10 brisk walk, measurable, 10 minutes, achievable, 10 minutes, anybody, relevant, health, time-bound over the next 1 month. Some are different. So now we see all these people coming out with 21-day challenge, 21. Sugar is not going to be, you're not going to kick sugar in 21 days. It will kick you. Sugar is going to take 3 months or maybe longer. Okay, I didn't mean to impugn you. Meat is going to take longer. I grew up in meat. We had a family, I told you this yesterday. We had a lodge for hunting. We're terrible hunters, but we still ate from the grocery store. So it's going to take longer. So you have to really plan with your own addictions in mind. What am I going to have difficulty with? Give it more time until it becomes habit. And by the way, it will become habit. Now, if I have something too sweet, it's cloying. It's uncomfortable. Your taste is not taste. Aisha said it beautifully, so I'm not going to re-say. It's the environment, culture, everything that you grew up with. And you learn about that when you go to all these other countries and they give you their best food. And it's not that it's not the best food. It's just that the tastes are different. And for you, it's like, oh, really? Not because their food is bad, because I just don't have the sophistication. Yeah. So understand the SMART goals. Create a life around change, meaning it takes a commitment. I want to make sure that people understand that a lot of times we cause pain to ourselves when we take on something half-heartedly and don't do the right, don't have the right commitment, don't have the right elements, don't have the right resources and the mindset. And all it does is cause you angst, anxiety, guilt, failure, and terrible. If you really want to change something, do it in a measurable, systematic way with all those things that I said, and small increments, and succeed. That's where you bring the dopamine, and enough dopamine nudges that ship moves. That's another clue. You move the ship of serotonin through the little tugs of dopamine. So that's important. So be committed for the change. And it doesn't have to be everything. You don't have to become the world's greatest, healthiest human being overnight. You're going to be great at managing sugar in the next month. And that's good. And then the next thing and the next thing. But one thing that I want to kind of bring is change is to be human. To change is to be human. Your frontal lobe was created for you to think and change for the better. Your frontal lobe was created for you to think and change for the better. I mean, I can understand people saying no, but it's important that we understand we have not even more the fact that that's who we are. It's an incredible tool we have where we can actually bring health to our lives. So what are we changing? We're changing feelings, thoughts, and behaviors. We're changing feelings, thoughts, and behaviors. There isn't much else. And we're changing old habits. Habits are often linked to other bad habits. You have good habits and bad habits. And bad habits are often linked to other bad habits, which are linked to other bad habits. And all of this started much earlier than we know. And I'll tell you how it started. But change is difficult. And sometimes you slip and you fail in the middle. But ultimately, it's beautiful and life-altering. To me, this is my favorite talk. We give many, many different talks. This is my favorite. This is about the human capacity to control their environment and their own health, instead of just throwing pills at you or some facts that we learned. The ability is this. If you're ready, it requires a psychological commitment. It requires for you to kind of learn about where the data is coming from. As we said, there's a lot of talking heads. It takes a comprehensive approach, and it doesn't mean that you have to do it all at once, but you have to know that ultimately it's a comprehensive approach. You can eat the best food in the world, but if you're not moving at all, it's not going to do much. Or you can challenge your brain at Nobel Prize level, but if you're eating 5 burgers a day, you're going to have a problem. Our 2 grandparents, brilliant people, but they had terrible diet. And for some reason, philosophers don't move. They never moved. So that's the combination bad. And it should be a systematic approach, systems approach. So I talked about SMART goals, but SMART goals have to be systematized, so you don't have to think about it. It has to become part of your life, and I'll talk about that. And get rid of these 2 disempowering words. I would write a book about these 2 words. I dislike these 2 words. One is motivation. It's the most demotivating word in language. If a word doesn't give you a capacity to use it in your life in a measurable way, what did it do? It just made Tony Robbins richer. But what did it do for you? What are you going to do with motivation? Oh, I love this. Just pull yourself up by the bootstraps. No, I can't. I'm the most motivated. I'm quite a motivated person. Let's just put it there. And I have to attribute that to my mother, who was just crazy. But there are days I wake up and I can't get motivated. Now what do? You have to have a system in place to motivate. And throw away the word motivation. Systems work. Processes work. Things that you know how to move the lever, that works, not just a word. The second word is moderation. Moderation is a word that lazy people use to get out of doing things. I've used it quite often. What does that mean? If I'm drinking a canister of cyanide, moderation is half a canister? Or I used to eat meat 7 times a day with beef jerky from Pittsburgh, salt, you name it. Eating 5 times would have been moderation? What does that mean? Anytime a word doesn't have a measurable quantity to it from a health perspective, it's not useful. So throw it away. Now, what you do work with is what is the optimal? We never shy away from the optimal. The optimal, here it is, Aisha said, is whole food, plant-based, planned whole food, plant-based diet. Planned part is, even if you're whole food, plant-based, but if you're not watching your B12, if you're not watching your omega-3, if you're not watching your vitamin D by blood tests and all of this stuff, it's still not the optimal. So a planned whole food, plant-based diet is the optimal. Now, are you supposed to start with a whole food, plant-based diet like that? No. That's like me telling you to run. Or I don't know who, many of you might already be there, but let's say you're not. It's like telling somebody to start running the marathon. Your next step is your one next step. Greens. 10 minutes of walk in the morning. Prayer, 3 minutes, somebody said that. Or mindful breathing. Or meditative dishwashing. Aisha tells me that's a very important thing and has me do that every night. So she called it meditative dishwashing. Okay. And so sleep hygiene. Go to bed same time, wake up same time. These are doable things. And then do one thing for your mind. Pick up a musical instrument. Learn a new language. Forget about new language, that's too much. 10 words. Aisha and I have been in a battle for learning Spanish. She's way ahead of me, but it's all medical terms though. So yeah, so small, measurable, incremental steps towards that. So that's the thing to do. Identify your objective and purpose. Clearly, measurably identify impediments towards that purpose. And that's important. That's a tough one. That's why we have this dining room where you can write on all the walls, because you got to write it down to visualize it. What are the impediments to that goal? Let's take walking. if you know that for 25 minutes of walking every morning, brisk walking, reduces your chance of Alzheimer's by 45%, and that's Alzheimer's, which also means that actually increases your focus significantly, your memory significantly, your executive function significantly, but they looked at the disease state. Of course, it does all this way, way better. Why isn't everybody walking 25 minutes? No guilt, no blame, there are impediments. Identify them. If it's the fact that you don't have a gym near you, don't go to a gym. If you have a gym near you and you have to dress up like you're going to a party, don't go to the gym. If you have a neighborhood, walk the neighborhood brisker. If your neighborhood is not safe, stay in the house. While the news is going on, that half an hour, step in place. That's it. If you have problems with your knees, sit down on the couch, get a foot pedal exercise. You have problems with that, put it on the table, use the arms. You have problems with that, just move your waist. Enough to get tired. Get rid of impediments. Don't fool yourself. Don't do New Year resolution. Buy all kinds of new exercise clothing. I know I'm guilty of that. I even got gloves and all, and Aisha was laughing at me. And the clothes and all. No, none of that. What is going to get you from point A to point B of that one behavior? And it's important because when you check off, and I'll get you what that check off means. When you check off that, that's dopamine surge. You know who knows that better than anybody else? Vegas. That one-armed bandit, that sound, that is a stimulus directly at your dopamine. So instead of that, make a little box and check it off. And that's literally equivalent to that. Identify the aligned positive behaviors. What other behaviors that you have that could align with that? Well, I wake up in the morning anyway for breakfast. What if I wake up 10 minutes early and do the walk? What if I put my shoes, exercise shoes, right next to the bed? What if when I go buy greens, I cut them up one time a week, Sunday, and put them right in front? So align your behaviors. Marshal resources, find the things that are going to make that one behavior and make them part of your life. Make it a process. If it's a contrived, artificial behavior, it will fail back to the baseline. Make it part of your life. Make it part of your natural movement. If there are too many chairs in your house, our dining room has a ping pong table. That was my vote. Make the environment conducive for the given behavior. And it's important. We go to many of these conferences because we're invested. Well, then let's truly invest in that by doing those things. Stand up more. In fact, stand up. Stand up. Yeah. Remember I said leg strength is brain strength? Your couch at home is actually softer than this. Have a chair. Go down. Sit. One up. One more time. Back up. Yeah, that's it. You do, well, okay, now people are showing off. Now you're showing off. But do you understand that 10 of those are more powerful than many of these pills they're selling on TV? 10 of them. And the number one thing that will reduce your risk of falling is that. Quads, hamstrings, balance around the knees. Do that. One behavior. And then next to your chair, have a sheet of paper, check it off. I did my squats. Never do it to the point of injury. Do it less than you would have otherwise, and then move it at comfort level. That's critical. And I said, make it part of your life. Make it part of your life. Make it a process within your life. Identify the automatic behaviors that we talked about. Automatic thoughts, emotions, behaviors. What are automatic thoughts? As soon as I get to bed, I start thinking about that one neighbor that did something, or one cousin. Those are the bad thoughts, automatic. Those are actually habits. We develop habits for negative thought. Identify negative, and part of the thought is, as soon as you're at a particular place, some food comes to your mind. Identify emotions, habitual emotions. What emotion comes to you that is negative in your life, and what is the trigger for it? Identify those. And when I mean identify, write them down. We do so much list making and taking notes and reading magazines. Get a notepad and make those lists of good and bad habits, specifically and measurably, not big grand things. And this is so critical for kids as well. Teaching kids to do this gives them such incredible power over their emotions, their behaviors, their achievements. So identify them. Not even your political beliefs or habits. You think they're thought out? No, they're built upon of repetitive behaviors. So let's think, I mean, keep them, but start thinking about the basic elements of it. That thinking process is important. So the pattern of habit building is trigger, behavior or routine, and reward. None of those are that clear to us. I'll give you one example of mine. I did great at work. I would eat very well. I would eat very well at breakfast, lunch. And as soon as, even if I had food right before going to home, as soon as I opened the door, because the fridge was close by, I would go to the fridge. Gone. The frontal lobe was gone. Yeah, although it's healthy food, but still quantity, right? Quantity matters. And so figure out your triggers for that behavior, because you just identified your negative behaviors, negative habits, and positive. Figure out the trigger. Figure out the behavior and figure out the reward for it. What was the reward? Sometimes the reward is the cake itself, right? You're eating a cake, that's the reward. So figure out other behaviors that you want to replace it with, find different triggers, and then reward it in a different way. By going out, going to a movie, going to, well, you can't go to a movie for every reward, or, telling yourself, I did great, out loud, I did great. This is fantastic, success here. Find the phrases that you love and use it as a reinforcement. And that works, because that's much better, because now you have a control. It's almost like a Pavlovian dog. Every time you have a success, you say that word, and it triggers that stimulus in you and makes you happy. That you get control over it. And as I said, identify the bad habits. Bad habits or all habits were established very early in dysfunctional survival mechanism. You remember that sympathetic system? Fight or flight? Most of your bad habits were for the fight or flight system, not for the thriving parasympathetic system. So something happened, you had to react to it to survive, either yell or create a bad emotion, and that gives you a little solace, you with yourself, with your negative emotion, that actually is rewarding. Or you ran away from the problem instead of facing it, or you got physical, or you ate something because that negative had to be replaced by sugar, which silences the negative. So all those were survival mechanisms, and the reward was usually getting away from pain by physically getting away, or physically hitting somebody and getting away, or verbally, or escaping another way, or mitigating it with some sugar or fat or food or such and such. So identify the bad habits, because a lot of our behaviors during childhood were created this way. None of our parents were trained, understood how to create these long-term behaviors of stimulus behavior response. A lot of it is dysfunctional, not everything, but a lot for all of us. I'm not judging anybody. I'm psychoanalyzing myself in front of all of you guys. So identify the keystone habits, well-defined, measurable, easily achievable, low-hanging behaviors again and again and again. We want to make sure you're resourced, meaning that you have the resources to do it. And these are the most, and find the one that's most consequential. As I said, the one that we love the most is the walk, or the squats, or the greens, or the sauce. Remember that sauce that Aisha was talking about?
Yeah.
You can feed the kids anything with those sauces. Cardboard, short of cardboard. Yeah. So you have a fridge full of these sauces that are healthy, and you have a bunch of cut vegetables and fruits and whatever, and you can feed them. And those are low-hanging fruits, pardon the pun. And then once you start developing these habits, they're stackable. One positive behavior can be stacked onto another behavior that can be stacked on another behavior. Once you start walking, doing your morning walk, you can actually then right away come back and eat something healthy because that actually stimulates. So it's amazing how you can start stacking behaviors. And create systems. Don't force habits, but live them. And there's no way you can do all of them at once. That's how we fail the most. This is where I want to caution everybody. Don't do everything at once. Create one habit and make it part of your system one at a time. And I can assure you, it will become part of your existence, slowly and for sure. Make them part of your everyday life. Develop behaviors that don't need thinking. That's habits. And work on triggers and cues, as we said, and reward intrinsically. Find words that reward you. Creating new habits. Short-term successes achieve goals. They're driven by the dopamine. Long-term, the ship of emotion is moved by small nudges like this. When you do that 10-minute walk, it's not just exercise. It's not just melatonin and cortisol replanning. It's not just your metabolism being reset. It's not just your anxiety and depression being affected. It's not just the fact that you're getting vitamin D. It's also one pull towards the ship of emotion, towards happiness. Literally, tug after tug after tug after tug. That's how it works. And you've just retraced the path. And this is how we manage happiness. I didn't start the talk by saying happiness. I said failure. But we want to end with the fact that literally happiness, serotonin baseline, is managed by managing your habits in a systematic way, in a measurable way, one behavior at a time. And before you know it, you have a sea of emotional behavior moving this emotions in one direction. And now a talk about lifestyle means something. Thank you.